Welcome to Wales Tech Week 2021. Thank you to our partners. Enjoy the session.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this session. My name is Magnus Harald. I work for the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. We are the UK's leading technology innovation and research centre for offshore renewable energy. And we're delighted, first of all, to be here for the first time at Wales Tech Week. This session is about supporting technologies behind the offshore renewable energy boom, which I hope will be of interest to those of you wishing to learn more about our exciting industry, as well as to those of you interested in working in what is one of the fastest growing sectors here in the UK. So just by means of a brief agenda, I'm going to start the session by providing a brief overview of the offshore renewable energy sector itself, both in terms of where we're at today and what the outlook for the future is. I'll then pass over to my colleague Michelle. She'll talk about the work we do here at the ORE Catapult in terms of supporting companies in this sector, and she'll also provide an overview of a project called MEECE that we're running here in Wales. That's a project that offers free research support to companies based here to develop new products and services. Then Michelle will hand over to our colleague Di. He's going to share a few case studies of projects where we've supported companies developing innovations for our sector that are reducing costs, improving performance, improving reliability and safety in the sector. Di will also introduce an innovation challenge that we're currently running and is live at the moment. Lastly, we'll finish with a question and answer session. All three of us will be on hand to answer any questions that you might have. Please, can I just ask you to submit any questions using the chat functionality during the session. And as I said, we'll go through these at the end if we have time. Okay, so I'm going to start things off by talking about the offshore wind industry. So the UK, we've been developing offshore wind projects now for over 20 years. And initially, the attraction was higher wind speeds that are found offshore and fewer issues with things like land constraints as well as visual impact. These are both issues that have been barriers to onshore development. But for many years, offshore wind was considered to be too expensive, and certainly too expensive to compete with conventional forms of power generation. But today, I'm pleased to tell you that it's actually one of the cheapest forms of new electricity, substantially cheaper than new nuclear, but also cheaper than new gas. And there are a number of reasons and how we've come to that point, one of which is just purely economies of scale. But then there also have been a number of innovations in all aspects of offshore wind projects. So in the installation or in the operations and maintenance phases of these projects. And technologies really have played a key role in bringing costs down. And we now today have one of the largest installed capacities of offshore wind in the world, in fact, the largest, at around 10.4 gigawatts installed off our coastline. That's enough to meet 10% of our electricity demand, and that comes from over 2,000 offshore wind turbines. So we're positioned as a global leader in offshore wind, and the achievements to date has certainly made this a UK success story. So the map on this slide I've put up to highlight the amount of offshore wind activity that's taking place in the UK right now. you'll notice that many of the projects that are highlighted here are either coloured red or amber. That means these are projects that are in development. And this is a point I'll come back to in a few slides' time, but really the point I wanted to make with this slide is just to highlight the fact that the offshore wind industry truly is a UK-wide opportunity with projects happening in most corners of our country. And Wales is certainly no different in that regard. In fact, some of the first offshore wind projects in the UK were developed off North Wales about 20 years ago. These projects are still operational today. And for any of you that have been to Llandudno, for example, you can see these projects from the coastline on a clear day. And one of the other nice things about the industry is it's presented a number of opportunities to coastal communities for regeneration and redevelopment. As much as 10% of the UK's population lives in coastal towns or coastal villages, and these are areas which historically have had some of the highest shares of employment decline as well as population decline. But the offshore renewable energy industry is bringing new life into these areas. And there are places in the UK, for example, like the Humberside, Teesside, East Anglia, and now also Pembrokeshire. And all of these areas are becoming hubs for offshore renewables. And this is really great news for these areas because many of them went through long periods of decline, and offshore renewables are now not only literally repowering these communities, but also in a figurative sense, they are repowering them. If we now move on to the turbine technologies that are in use in offshore wind farms today, you might think that by and large they're very similar to onshore wind turbines, and you'd mostly be correct. But the main difference is that offshore wind turbines are substantially bigger than those that are found onshore, and this is something that really you really need to go offshore to fully appreciate. And I'm afraid only a few lucky people get to do that. But I've tried to highlight it with this slide and the image. And you can see that the largest wind turbines offshore now, we're approaching structures that are not dissimilar in size to something like the Eiffel Tower. In fact, I don't think it will be very long until we get to something of that scale. But the biggest machines nowadays, they can produce about 15 megawatts, and that's enough to power 20,000 homes from a single wind turbine. The blade lengths on these machines are also phenomenal in size. We've got blade lengths now that exceed 100 meters, and that's when you relate that to the rotor diameter on these wind turbines, you've got a diameter that is 3 times the wingspan of a Boeing 747. So absolutely incredible machines that are being installed off our coastline. And it's, the size of these machines has been one of the reasons that costs have come down so much, because installing larger but fewer wind turbines offshore really has meant that, you've got fewer installations to do, you've got fewer trips offshore to make to go and service and maintain these turbines. And that has really been instrumental in reducing costs in the sector. So the industry has definitely been a success to date, but what about the future outlook? The UK government has already committed to installing 40 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. That would just about quadruple today's capacity, so there's going to be a huge amount of activity over the next 9 years, and that was highlighted in the slide I showed you previously with the offshore wind map. But that's really just the beginning, because it's also been estimated that between 75 to 100 gigawatts will be necessary in the UK by 2050 if we are to achieve net zero. So it's certainly fair to say that offshore wind is here to stay, and it's also true that this is a sector that's only going to get bigger. In Wales, we're also set for a new dawn of offshore wind activity. We have 2 gigawatts already in the pipeline for projects in North Wales. And these are projects that will be expected to come online before the end of this decade. But actually, the larger prize for Wales is floating wind. And this is particularly true for South Wales and in the Celtic Sea region. Floating wind, these are projects where the turbines are placed on large floating structures that are ultimately moored to the seabed. Just as in the picture I have here on the right-hand side, this is actually a floating wind turbine in operation. And that's different to the norm that has been used in the industry to date, where most offshore wind turbines are ultimately placed on foundations that are fixed to the seabed. But the attraction of floating wind is that it enables us to access deeper waters where wind speeds are higher and in areas that were previously deemed infeasible. And Wales is one of the best places in the UK to do this. And successful rollout of floating offshore wind globally will open up the lion's share of offshore wind resources, because if you take Europe, for example, as much as 80% of the European offshore wind resource is found in deep water, where you would need floating wind technology to harness that energy. Okay, if we move away from offshore wind now, but still talking about the future, there are also several companies developing technologies to harness the energy from our ocean's waves, as well as the tidal currents found around our coastline. All 4 of the companies behind the technologies in this slide are based in Wales and are testing and developing these technologies here in the UK. And we actually have a leading global position on this front, developing, that is in terms of developing wave and tidal technologies. And if we can commercialize these technologies, it's something then that we can export to the world. And that's something that's completely different to the offshore wind sector, where today, the projects we have in the UK, the turbine components themselves, many of those key power generating components are sourced from companies based elsewhere in the world. So we could be the ones that export the wave and tidal technologies to projects worldwide. But the UK is also blessed with wonderful wave and tidal resources, which may not come as a surprise to you, given that we're an island nation. But it's been estimated that wave and tidal technologies could provide as much as 20% of our electricity demand. And the other attractive thing about these technologies is that their source of energy is not correlated with wind energy, meaning that when the wind doesn't blow, you still have wave and tidal power often, and these technologies could keep the lights on when there is no wind. Wave and tidal energy are also inherently much more predictable than wind energy, and that is something that's really invaluable when it comes to managing our electricity network as well as our national grid. Okay, my last slide really is just to summarize the opportunity for UK companies in the offshore renewable energy sector. So I've said that the government not only has ambitions to install much more offshore renewables, but the government also has ambitions where it wants to see much more UK content in projects. That is, UK companies winning work in these projects and getting considerable benefit out of the sector. And the government has targeted 60% UK content in all offshore wind projects by 2030. And while the industry has been a success to date, there are still a number of significant opportunities for companies to develop solutions where develop solutions that could reduce costs further, improve the reliability of the sector, make it a safer place to work, and also make it more sustainable. And that last one might come as a bit of a surprise, but there is now increasing focus on things like making wind turbine blades recyclable, for example, as well as decarbonising the vessels that are used in offshore wind projects. So, whether that's something like a electric propulsion system used in these vessels, for example. There are also huge diversification opportunities for companies working in other sectors to come into our sector. We've already witnessed this to some extent with companies from sectors like maritime, aerospace, and automotive sectors developing solutions for our industry. Okay, with that in mind, that takes me on to Michelle, who's going to talk about the work we do here at the Catapult.
Thanks, Magnus. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a short overview about the catapults. So we are part of a family of 9 catapults, and these include digital, connected places, medicines discovery, satellite applications, energy system, high-value manufacturing, cell and gene therapy, compound semiconductor applications, which is also based here in Wales, and then our own Catapult Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. So we're all publicly funded through Innovate UK, and we're not-for-profit organisations. We're here to do research and development in our chosen sectors and to support the UK industry so that the R&D that we do is to make our industries much stronger. Next slide, please, Magnus. So Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, it covers offshore wind, but we also look at wave and tidal technologies. About 80% of what we do is related to wind, because at the moment it's such a big market for it. But wave and tidal, they'll have their time, but it's in the early stages of development at the moment. With the increasing focus on floating wind, we think this will actually help wave and tidal technologies to prosper. There's also an increase in focus on integration of renewables, the energy systems approach, and particularly green hydrogen. That is hydrogen that's created from renewable energy. Next slide, please. So we're a UK-wide organisation. We've got our headquarters in Glasgow. The majority of our test facilities are in Blyth in Newcastle. And we've got regional offices all over the UK with our Welsh office in Pembroke Dock. We engage with universities all over the UK. And in particular, we have 3 academic hubs focused on blades, electrical infrastructure and powertrains. And we also have a new research centre in China. Next slide, please, Magnus. So now I'm going to give you an overview of MEECE, which is the Marine Energy Engineering Centre of Excellence. So this is our flagship project in the Welsh office. It's an £11 million project, part funded by the European Regional Development Fund and partly through the Swansea Bay City deal. With the 2 different funding streams, this allows us to collaborate with 4 Welsh universities. So we partner with Swansea, Cardiff, Cardiff Metropolitan and Bangor University. MEECE is also one of the 4 projects involved in the £60 million Pembroke Dock Marine project, alongside Meta, Pembroke Port Developments and the Pembrokeshire Demonstration Zone. Next slide, please. So MEECE was developed to carry out research and development projects with the companies in West Wales and the Valleys region. So these are shown in dark pink on the map. We aim to support innovation predominantly in the marine energy sector, but not exclusively. We can work with companies to support designing of products and components, building, testing, verification, validation. Being funded, we obviously have targets to achieve. So we're looking to bring new products and services to companies, but also to the marketplace. Looking at new patents, new jobs and research collaborations. Next slide, please. Our natural target is the marine energy sector, but we're looking for the supply chain and developers. We're also looking for projects in aquaculture, hydrogen, and any product or service that would benefit from being demonstrated in the Milford Haven waterway. We're very flexible with our project timescales. We're looking to work on projects from anywhere from 6 weeks to 9 months with varying budgets. Our funding doesn't allow us to give companies grants, but it does allow us to purchase generic or bespoke equipment, including ADCPs, cameras, radars. We've recently purchased a buoy to allow us to test devices on the meta sites. Next slide, please. We can fund the testing and demonstration of your technologies at a number of unique facilities. We work very closely with the Marine Energy Test Area for this purpose, which is dedicated offshore test facilities in the Milford Haven waterway, shown by the map in the top right-hand corner. At our other ORE Catapult locations, we operate a number of unique facilities for testing. This includes open access offshore wind turbine, as well as a powertrain and wind turbine blade test rigs for testing some of the world's latest and largest wind turbines. The bottom right image shows one of our blade facilities. Our university partners also have testing facilities that we can provide access to, including wave tanks and wind tunnels. Next slide, please, Magnus. So one of the other projects that we work on is the Milford Haven Energy Kingdom project. So this is a hydrogen-based project, which is concentrating on what a decarbonised smart local energy system could look like for Milford Haven, Pembroke and Pembroke Dock. So we will be electrolysing green hydrogen on site from the Port of Milford Haven Smart Energy Local Cluster. We will be demonstrating a hybrid heat pump and hydrogen-ready boiler at one of the Port of Milford Haven's buildings. This will allow us to gain vital feedback and comparison data between existing conventional boilers and also the user experience. We will have 2 River Simple Razza cars, which will predominantly be shared between the Pembrokeshire County Council and the Port of Milford Haven. COVID allowing, we're hoping to have community information events where people can come and sit in the cars and learn all about the hydrogen fuel cell technology. These trials are really important as they will allow people to test real-world hydrogen vehicles and heating equipment. The data from both of these trials will feed into final reports, which will be submitted to Innovate UK. The reports include design of underlying systems architecture for a trading platform, infrastructure outline drawings, generation model and hydrogen production model, detailed design for hydrogen-ready heating boiler applications, design outline drawings for transport solutions, and budget for a complete local energy system. We're now just going to show you a short video to give you some more information about the Milford Haven Energy Kingdom project.
Cool, thanks very much, Michelle. So yeah, I'll be talking about a few case studies. So, next slide, please, Magnus. Thanks so much. Just wanted to put a few numbers really onto some of the stuff Magnus was talking about earlier, and also really why we undertake these projects. So first off, floating offshore wind is predicted to create 17,000 jobs and generate 33.6 billion by 2050. So it's some pretty big numbers. Tidal stream could support 4,000 jobs and generate 1.4 billion by 2030. Wave technologies, although behind Tidal in its development, could lead to 8,000 jobs and £8 billion cumulative net benefit by 2040. So really it's easy to understand why innovation within and support for these ancillary industries is key to achieving the outcomes. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what support or why ORE supporting a project can provide such good outcomes. So when compared to other companies in the offshore renewable energy industry, companies who've been supported by the ORE Catapult could receive over 12 times more money in private investment funding, receive four times more likely to receive private investment funding, receive 16 times more money, 4 times more likely to be classified as high growth, and 7 times more likely to receive a grant. So really there are quite large benefits to working with us. Next slide, please, Magnus. So the first case study I'm going to talk about is the Ifrog robot that's being developed by Innotech UK. So Ifrog is an amphibious device that can function above the water and up to 60 meters below the waterline. It adheres to the structure of the monopile of the wind turbine and through magnetic adhesion technology. A team of these robots can clean corrosion and biofouling, as well as undertake surface inspection and weld integrity checks. The multi-robot solution was developed under a 3-year program funded by Innovate UK and was brought together Innotech UK, so was the developer of the robots, the ORE Catapult, TWI, the Welding Institute, and Brunel University in London. ORE Catapult have provided expertise from our Operations and Maintenance Centre of Excellence, who I'll discuss further in a minute. ORE Catapult also undertook initial technology demonstrations at our dry and wet dock facilities, and it's predicted that the Ifrog could save wind farm operators £4 million per turbine over a farm's 25-year life cycle. Yeah, the Operations and Maintenance Centre of Excellence it's located in the Port of Grimsby. The Operations and Maintenance Centre of Excellence is building on the Humber region's energy heritage and extensive expertise in servicing offshore wind farms. It's a national hub for enhancing the UK's world-leading position in offshore wind farm operational performance. There are a few key objectives: supporting growth of a resilient UK supply chain, to stimulate innovation-based export markets, drive digital, data, AI, robotics, and autonomous systems to lead advances in O&M. Next slide, please. Just a brief video just to see the robot in action. So there's some interesting factors that make this robot different from previous that have come previous. It has the ability to move between under the waterline to above the waterline quite easily, and it can also move diagonally, which is quite a step change in this kind of technology. And that's in our test facilities there in Blyth. So the next case study I'm going to talk about is an ROV being developed by Robco. So Robco have developed this ROV, which is a remotely operated underwater vehicle to undertake subsea surveys. The ROV uses a stereo camera rather than the more conventional laser scan, and can produce precise, high-quality data in a fraction of the time of the more conventional laser scan. So the ways in which we at the ORE Catapult have helped support Robco, we helped secure 2 rounds of Innovate UK grants. We helped the company secure multiple private investment opportunities. We initiated introductions with industry majors who were really keen on the technology. Our testing and validation team assisted and advised with the use of our state-of-the-art test facilities in Blythe. Specifically in this case, it was the use of our dry dock test facility, which features a replica seabed, which was obviously very handy to test out their particular technology. And as of 2020, the company had grown from 3 to 47 employees, with plans to create an additional 20 jobs in the UK. Has an estimated export value of £100 million over the next 5 years. So there's really, really good growth for the company. So really exciting product. Thanks, Magnus. So again, just a short video seeing the ROV in action. A couple of interesting images there, just obviously of undertaking a survey. And then here you can see the kind of point cloud data the survey will produce. So it's really quite detailed. And then the kind of measurements that can be taken within the software. So those of you familiar with the kind of requirements of survey, it's very useful. Cheers, Magnus. That's yeah, so on to talking about the innovation challenge we currently have going on within MEECE. So first off, for those of you not aware, I thought I'd give a brief outline of essentially what an innovation challenge is. So an innovation challenge needs, essentially, it needs to have a clear statement of a problem that needs to be solved. It needs to have an owner for the challenge, which would then essentially be a customer. And there needs to be a market for the solution, essentially to define how much it would be worth. Solutions can be at any stage of development. So if it's a sort of back of the envelope concept, we can help you check the feasibility of that concept. Or if it's more of just an off-the-shelf product that has been developed for a different sector, we can help demonstrate it in our sector. So either one is feasible. It's important to note that solutions don't need to be complete, but it could be part of the puzzle, and we can help you find the rest of the solution by matching you up with development or manufacturing partners. And if we feel that it's a solution worth developing, we can help you find further funding. Thanks. Mind just move on, please.
That's on that line.
Sorry?
Is it the next slide or is it this one? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So our innovation project, specifically the one we're having going on in MEECE at the moment, is to monitor underwater species. So there's a big problem with the industry at the moment to understand underwater species around tidal turbines. So we want to try and understand how tidal turbines affect underwater species. So there are 3 main stakeholder groups involved with this. So we need to provide key information for consenting bodies, which in our case is Natural Resources Wales. The next stakeholder group would be RSPB, Royal Society for Protection of Birds, and also the local communities in which these will be installed. And also finally would be the turbine designers and developers themselves. So we want to provide them with information such as, is there actually a problem? And if there is a problem, could it be designed around? So a brief example of a solution that could be provided would be a lightweight pinger that could actually be attached to the animal. that could then be tracked using a series of underwater microphones around the device. So, an example of the issues that this would pose would be it would need to be small or light enough that it would not disturb the behavior of the animal. Battery life would need to be sufficient that it would provide enough data, and it would also need to be very durable. You'd need a sufficient array of microphones that you would pick up enough data from the pinger, and also you need to access this data somehow. Also, underwater, noise pollution is already an issue, so adding more noise pollution, this is a question that needs to be answered. So the ways that we could support you in this particular project would be, we could undertake a desk study, we could potentially produce a prototype, we could investigate manufacturing routes, or we could actually undertake some testing, as Michelle said, in our with some of our potential partners. We could look at building and operating an array of microphones, or we could find some partners if you say provided part of the solution. Okay, so thank you, Magnus. So what's next then? So if you're interested, you can check out our website, which will be at the end of the presentation, or come to the booth. The challenge is now open, and it closes on the 28th of July. The selection and notification of successful innovations will be by the 28th of August. And what you get out of it essentially will be up to 6 responses will be selected and will receive our support. The successful applicants will be given the opportunity to pitch to the challengers and potential other stakeholders. The package may also include support where the company is eligible, the eligibility, as Michelle discussed earlier, from MEECE, up to £35,000 of effort from the MEECE team per innovation to develop and demonstrate your innovation, to support and development of bids for further funding to validate the innovation, and technical support from the wider ORE Catapult team, which is, we have a lot of experience out there. Thank you, Magnus. So where we have a lot of help, experience is coordination and collaboration. So we can collate as much background information as we can find. We will then share our understanding of current solutions with you. We will establish workshops to engage with stakeholders and really try and establish your understanding of the bigger picture around the solutions that need to be brought into place. With the solution then in place, if we feel that the solution is something worth taking forward, we'll see if there's an appetite then for a bid for larger EU funding. As this is a very large project. So potential deployment for future validation, we would be aiming for next summer. However, as I say, it's a big project, so it will not be easy or cheap. It would need to satisfy a lot of stakeholders, a lot of varying requirements from it as well. And the solution really needs to be suitable for businesses. So it's really very much not an academic project. So the solution would need to be sort of cost effective and must be able to integrate with sort of current tidal devices, current tidal stream systems. Cheers, Magnus. So has anyone got any questions?
Okay, thanks very much. So that now takes us on to the Q&A section. I'd also just at this point, as Di said, put up our contact details, so you can find out more information about the MEECE project on our website here. You can also register interest on that website too, to be kept in contact about the project. Also, the contact details for all 3 of us are on the slide as well. Should you prefer to go to any of us direct, that's also fine. I've noticed one question coming through in the chat, and that's from Jeff. So thanks very much. Please, anyone else, feel free to submit a question now if you want. But yeah, Jeff asks, your slide on ORE Future, so it's Offshore Renewable Energy Future, shows a satellite, but unfortunately the legend was too small to read. Sorry about that, Jeff. It was quite a detailed slide you went to point out. Can you please elaborate on the need for SATCOM, satellite communications, in ORE applications? I can do my best, certainly, Jeff. I'm afraid it's not something I'm an expert in, but certainly things like satellites are being used now to perform resource measurements, so undertaking over large spatial areas, looking at the wave energy resource. So that's important to plan offshore activities. So if you know that there's an incoming storm, for example, then chances are you're not going to send a large crew out to shore to go and fix a wind turbine, for example. So that's one obvious example. I mean, resource is needed for a lot of aspects in our projects. The other one would be, I can just off the top of my head think, is these projects now are moving further and further from shore, and there's need for things like over-the-horizon communication systems. So conventional communication systems that were historically used in these offshore wind projects. That's not only communicating with things like the turbine, but also the substation. There's also vessels in the field. It could have drones in the field being used increasingly now to inspect turbines, as well as unmanned and autonomous vessels. These all need a reliable communication system, and I think SATCOM definitely there are definitely applications for those systems. Those are just a couple I can think of off the top of my head. As I said, I'm not an expert. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, as I say, that's the main I've come across is almost positioning and communications with autonomous vehicles as they become more relevant, really, within the industry. So yeah, I think that's the main one I've come across as well.
Definitely. Okay. Are there any other questions? We're actually not far from the end of the session anyway. I think the only there is a question that's just come in for Michelle. Given that the UK was leading the way in wave energy from as far back as 1979, why do you think that we have not created the environment to develop this technology as has been done in wind? Michelle, would you like to answer that, or would you like to ask someone else?
I'd quite like to pass that to you, Magnus.
That's okay. It's a very big question. Again, I can do my best. I mean, there have been times where the wave energy sector has received a lot of support. Certainly in Scotland, for example, and certainly there have been big companies backing some of these technologies. I remember E.ON and Scottish Power were backing the Palamis device at one point, and there were teams behind these companies that were best part of 100 people, but still there were challenges, and certainly in terms of producing power reliably and consistently, it seemed to be the biggest. I think offshore wind certainly had a lot of help in the early days, and that same help hasn't been applied to the wave and tidal sector yet. Tidal is actually getting quite close now. Its costs are coming down all the time, but it's a huge question, Jeff. I'm afraid I can't. There are a number of reasons why it hasn't been given the backing that obviously all three of us think it should have. But the potential for wave energy is huge. In fact, arguably even greater than offshore wind. And it's still an area of active development, particularly amongst academia. But there are still quite a large number of small companies in the UK working in this space. Many of them are now trying to diversify slightly by developing combined offshore wave and wind projects, which I think is quite a smart move from some of these companies. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, and we're just coming up to the end of the session now, I'd just like to finish by saying that all three of us will be on our exhibition booth for the rest of today and also tomorrow. And there is also a marine energy session all day on Thursday that I'd encourage you all to tune into. That's been hosted by Marine Energy Wales, and our colleague Paul Elsmore will also be doing a brief talk as part of that session. So from all three of us, thanks very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Wales Tech Week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. Rewatch all of our sessions online. Thank you to our partners.